Hi, here's Kamil. I'm a data scientist at Neptune AI, and in this tutorial I will show you Neptune Client. It is our open source Python library that lets you integrate your code with Neptune and by doing so track and organize your experiments. I will show you how to use it, and I will present a handful of functions that you will find most useful. Neptune Client is designed to be very simple and straightforward to use. Note that you can run your experiments on any hardware of your choice. Laptop, workstation, or in the cloud. Let's jump straight to the first example. Alright, so what you can see here is a minimalist example of the Neptune experiment. So let's check out the code. First, we simply import Neptune. Then we initialize a session with Neptune. What is important in this line is this string. It consists of two pieces. First piece is my username in case that you work on the individual account, or your company or entity name in case that you are working within some organization. Next part is the name of the project. In our case, it is example project. Next, you are ready to create an experiment. In this method, all of the parameters are optional, so really minimal invocation is like this. However, I added the name, simple name, and description. Alright, so what comes next? Once I started an experiment, I am ready to log various data types as my experiment is running. So the most common function in Neptune is a log metric that appends some numeric value to some log. So here I need to pass two parameters. First one is the name of that log. In my case, it is loss. And second one is simply a number. And I repeat this log metric 100 times in this for loop. Alright, so this is the minimalist code. Let's quickly run it actually and see what is the result in Neptune. So when I run the code, in a second you will see a link to the experiment. Yeah, here it is. And here this experiment is appended here to the top of the table in the leaderboard. So here is the experiment. Here is my loss. It is my numeric value. If I enter the experiment, this loss is visualized automatically as an interactive chart. I will tell you more about the charts in the next tutorials. However, what you need to see right now is that each new experiment is appended here to the top of the table, and the metrics that I wanted to track are here as well. That was just a minimalist example, so let's dive deeper. Neptune has much more to offer. Let's check out the example 2 code, which has more options. So import and Neptune init are the same. What is new here in this code is that in the create experiment, I have an argument params. This params is a Python dictionary that set all the parameters for the given experiment. So it is very common in machine learning or deep learning experiments that we have a large number of different parameters that affect the final score, and we want to keep track of all of them to further study their interaction between the parameters or to find out the set of the parameters that give me the best final score. So here I pass those parameters. Next, you are already familiar with the log metric. So here is just another metric like this. It is called iteration. And there is a new type of logging option. So for logging text, definition of that function is the same. So first one is just the name of that log. In this case, it is textual info, and then comes the value. In case of the log text, it is just some string. And next, what is interesting is log image. Log image allow me to log images to the experiment. In this case, again, definition is the same. So the first argument is the name of the logs, and the second one is the value. In my case, it is a NumPy array that will be visualized in Neptune. Let's run example 2 and see what happens in Neptune, in the UI, what we can see. So again, once the experiment will start, I can see this link to the experiment, and in the UI, exactly new experiment is here. Let's go inside And here we can see the iteration. First chart, iteration, the second one loss, as I created them in the code. Next, in the logs tab, I can see this textual information, textual info with all the values logged to this. Finally, the images, the mosaics, here they are, also interactive, so I can skim through them and analyze deeper. What is also important is the tab parameters. So let's just remind you that in the example 2, we have those two parameters in the params here in create experiment, and they are stored here in the parameters tab in this particular experiment. But what is also very important is that when I go back to the experiments, I have a decay factor and iterations parameters. So when I go back to the experiments and I click here in the manage columns, I can go to those numeric parameters because they are numbers, and it was a decay factor and iterations, and these are as well visualized here, so I can check multiple experiments and analyze the parameters, the numeric values, and other relevant pieces of information either in this experiment dashboard view, or I can go into single experiment and see in detail what's happening there. Alright, so these two examples showed you how easy it is to start working with Neptune and how to start tracking your experiments to Neptune. I think that now it's a good time to move to something more advanced. So let's move to the example 3. Here I use a fashionist dataset to train a neural net. So it is a classification task. What is new in the code? First of all, I have much more parameters. These are the parameters of my neural network. Next, in the create experiment, I also set some tags. In the further video tutorials, I will show you how to work with tags efficiently. Here, I just wanted to mention that you can assign tags to experiment at the experiment creation. Next, there are upload sources. What it allows me to do is to have this one-to-one mapping between experiment and the code. So each time I create a new experiment, I have the exact snapshot of the code that I used to run this experiment. So I don't need to worry to commit all the changes, even those tiny changes that I do during my experimentation. Alright, so one remark here is that Neptune create experiment, it returns the experiment object. So you can just take this experiment object and use it to invoke the methods that you can also invoke using this global Neptune context. Alright, so here is the dataset that I create. Next, I create a set of properties. Property is a key value pair that you can log to the experiment, and you can edit those properties as the experiment is going. So you can change the values of each key value pair. So one particular idea that is very handy is that you can use set property to track data versions. So imagine that, like here, you just compute the version of the dataset and the labels, and you just set this as a key value pair to Neptune. So in this way, you can keep track of all the changes in the data. Alright, next, I visualize the sample of the fashionist dataset. I use a log image method to do it. I will show you the result in the UI in a second. Then I create a model, I compile this model. Here I log the model summary using a Neptune log method, so that the entire model architecture will be associated with each experiment run. Alright, so I'm ready to train the model. I log data here. So I use a Keras callback, it is a Lambda callback, and I just log data in a single method. So I just pass the logs and experiment. The log data is here in the utils. Here is the log data, logs, and Neptune. And the second argument, Neptune, is exactly what I told you before, that here is an experiment object. I created it here at the experiment creation. and I can pass it so that I can use all the logging methods on that experiment object. It is very convenient, especially if you have a larger code base and you need to pass those objects around. One more thing in this code that might be pretty useful is a log artifact. Log artifact is a method that allows me to log a pretty much arbitrary file to Neptune and associate it with the experiment. In this case, I log the model weights. It is a very common use case that you may want to secure your checkpoints during the experiment so that you will have this progression of the checkpoints also in Neptune. Finally, I evaluate the model and I also keep track of the evaluation metrics using a log metric method. So let's take a look how it looks in Neptune. So I will quickly jump to the classification view. In the future video tutorials, I will show you how to efficiently work with views. So what you can see here is a quite rich experiments dashboard with multiple columns, and those columns are created from the parameters, as you can see here, from the numeric logs and from other data types. Inside example experiment, I have this large number of parameters all tracked here. Next, in the details tab, I have at the bottom, I have those properties. I mentioned those key value pairs set property method, and those data is visualized here and can also be displayed in the experiments dashboard. Next, I have sources that I uploaded to the experiment. These are here, and this is exact snapshot of the code that I used to run my experiment. Next, what I did, I logged some artifacts. Here is model weights. I logged a simple single checkpoint. And finally, in the logs, I have all my numeric logs. I have example images that I mentioned before. So I have this representation, the sample of the dataset here. And finally, model summary, which is the model architecture that I logged as a text log. And of course, all the charts are interactive. These are numeric logs automatically displayed as interactive charts. All right, that's it for now. I just briefly introduced you to Neptune Client, our open source Python library that allows you to integrate your code with Neptune and start tracking your experiments. See you in the next tutorial.